Scenarios. I'm Richard Winfield, the creator of Invisible Coaching. How many times have you wished that you had said something, but the moment passed before you realized? Invisible coaching is coaching in the moment, so you have to be able to catch that moment. One of the exercises in the Invisible Coaching program involves scenarios. We show you a photograph and ask you to create a scenario of what's happening. And then we ask, if you were to intervene, what would you try to achieve and what would you do? So here are the questions. What's going on? What would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What would you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? If you can do this in a group, it's much better because it will stimulate a lively discussion. And maybe you need a facilitator just to help you to focus on the step-by-step process. But I'm sure if you download our online program, you can develop a system for yourself. The objective of the exercise is to develop your awareness of opportunities to make a positive contribution, and also to learn when and how not to interfere. You can learn about Invisible Coaching at www.invisible-coaching.info. Now here are some of the scenarios included in the program. So let's look at the scenarios. Now just to remind you, the purpose of this scenarios exercise is to give you the opportunity to experience a typical situation before it happens, and just to think through how you might actually behave if such a situation arises. So just to remind us now, these are the questions to ask during the exercise. What's going on? And it's entirely up to you to decide what that is. It's an imaginary situation. When you've decided what the situation really is, then the questions are, what would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? And if you remember, the purpose of the coach training is to help you avoid suggesting solutions. So let's look at the first one. This is where your coaching should really start, where the younger a child is to experience good questions and positive support, the better. So what's going on here? Now you could choose to be any one of three people. You could be somebody who turns up and observes and listens and concludes and decides to do something. You could be the lady, or you could be the child, because it's very good experience just to think what it is like to be a child. And it will help you then to interact more positively when such a situation applies. So here, let's just go through questions quickly. What's going on? What would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? Now, we've got a rather older pair here. So again, what's going on? Who are these people? What's the situation? And who could you be? Would you be one of the two men? Or would you be somebody turning up and observing the situation and maybe choosing to join in? So when you've decided what the situation is, what is your scenario in this case? What would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do? Think about it. What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And finally, how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? Now here we return to an interaction with a rather older child. And again, I wonder whether, when thinking it through, decide what's going on here. You might decide it would be really nice to experience this situation as the teenage boy. Because if you can understand better what it's like to be a teenage boy and think back to your childhood, then perhaps you can interact more positively. Or you might prefer to be the older man. So what is going on and what would be your role? Where would you fit in? What would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And of course, how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? Typical situation may be in an office environment. Again, could you be one or two? What's going on? Would you be the male or the female? Or would you be somebody turning up, listening in and wondering whether or not to join in? So what would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And sometimes sitting there and doing nothing might be positive. And how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? Another case in an office environment, I guess. Again, what is going on here? Is this a discussion? Is this a coaching session? Is this just a chat between breaks in a meeting? Are there lots of other people around this boardroom type table? Are you one of the two people? Or maybe are you sitting opposite, just observing? So when you've decided what is going on and who you are, what would you try to achieve? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? And this final scenario here with a larger group, apparently sitting outside, and noticing that there are people sitting around three sides of the table. There is a vacancy on this side of the table. So you could be one of those four people, in which case, who would you be? What's going on here? Or you could be somebody who walks by, or you could be somebody who brings a chair and sits at the table. So who would you be? What's going on? What would you try to achieve in that situation? What will happen if you do nothing? What could you say? What could you ask? What else could you do that would deliver the desired outcome? And finally, how tempted would you be to suggest a solution? And if I say in our Invisible Coach training, our objective is to stop you suggesting a solution, but rather to interact in a way which will help people to develop their own solutions and to know better in the future how to develop their own solutions. So to find out more about Invisible Coaching, you can go to www.invisible-coaching.info.